It was 8:14 p.m. on Christmas Eve, and the air in the Sterling dining room tasted of expensive rosemary and calculated cruelty. My father, Marcus, didn't even put down his silver carving knife when he delivered the killing blow. "Julian," he said, his voice as dry as the vintage Bordeaux in his glass. "We've reviewed the trust. Given your creative diversions, we've decided to reallocate your portion to your brother. You aren't a beneficiary anymore." Beside him, my brother Leo offered a mocking, heart gesture with his hands, a silent celebration of my digital execution. I didn't flinch. I didn't defend my silly tech hobby. I just took a slow sip of water and checked my watch. They thought they were cutting off a dependent, they had no idea they were unplugging their own life support. If you've ever been the invisible one at the table, let me know in the comments. To understand why I didn't argue, you have to understand the Sterling creed: if you can't build it with concrete and steel, it isn't real. My father built an empire of skyscrapers and dust, while I built an empire of code. At 23, I begged him for a $50,000 investment in a logistics algorithm. He laughed, a sound like gravel in a blender. "Julian," he'd sneered, "stop playing with your digital toys and come manage the parking garage. At least that's a real asset." I left that night. I spent 3 years in a windowless office, eating cold noodles and sleeping on a yoga mat, building Apex logic. To them, I was the unproductive ghost. To the market, I was the architect of the world's most efficient supply chain. By the time I was 30, my toys were handling more revenue than their entire real estate portfolio. The dining room was a museum of the past, filled with the heavy scent of mahogany and the suffocating pressure of tradition. Leo sat across from me, his face glowing with a smug, toxic warmth. "Don't take it personally, Julian," he said, leaning back. "Dad just wants the Sterling legacy in hands that actually touch the dirt. You're too busy in the cloud to understand the ground." My mother looked at her plate, her silence a familiar armor. It was an ambush disguised as a family tradition. They wanted to see me break, they wanted a tantrum to justify their decision. Instead, I pulled up the Sterling Group's internal analytics on my phone, the ones they didn't know I still controlled. I saw the red lines, the mounting debt, and the desperate reliance on my software. They weren't just cutting me out, they were biting the hand that fed them. At exactly 8:22 p.m., the atmospheric pressure in the room shifted. It wasn't the wind outside, it was the synchronized chiming of 3 different phones on the table. My father's phone let out a sharp, urgent ping, the sound he reserved for high-stakes market alerts. I didn't reach for mine. I knew what it said. A Google News notification had just hit the wires, and the headline was a digital earthquake. Leo's face went from smug to ghostly pale as he scrolled. "Dad," he whispered, his voice cracking like dry parchment. "You need to see this." He slid the screen toward our father. There, under the bold, iconic Forbes banner, was the new list of the world's most influential billionaires. My face was the cover photo. The title read, "The Ghost Architect: How Julian Sterling Built a $12 billion Empire in Total Silence." The room went dead quiet. The silence was clinical. My father stared at the screen, his fingers trembling as the $12 billion valuation mocked his $2 million punishment. Leo tried to laugh, a pathetic, jagged sound. "A glitch, Julian? Is this another one of your digital pranks?" I didn't answer him. Instead, I opened my laptop and projected a spreadsheet onto the smart glass wall of the dining room. It wasn't a family photo, it was a forensic audit of Sterling real estate. "For 5 years, Apex Logic has provided your firm's back-end for free," I said, my voice as cold as a mountain lake. At 8:30 p.m., the trial period ended. I hit enter. In real time, their tenant portals went dark, their automated payroll froze, and their credit lines, personally backed by my venture capital, vanished. I wasn't their son anymore. I was their largest creditor, and I was calling in the debt. The transformation was instantaneous. My father's gray, weathered face didn't just drop, it crumbled. The king of Beacon Hill was gone, replaced by a man realizing his throne was made of matchsticks. Julian, he stammered, his voice stripped of its practiced authority. We were just testing you. A sterling needs to be forged in fire. This was a lesson in resilience. I watched him, unimpressed by the desperate pivot. Leo was frantically hitting keys on his tablet, his eyes wide as he watched their operating capital evaporate. It's all gone, Dad, he choked out. The systems are locked. We can't even pay the security staff. My father reached across the table, his hand shaking, trying to grab my sleeve. He wasn't looking for a son, he was looking for a bailout. I stepped back, letting his hand fall onto the cold mahogany. I stood up, the chair's legs scraping against the floor like a final period at the end of a long, toxic sentence. The lesson is over, Dad, I said, my voice steady and devoid of the anger they expected. I didn't send Leo to prison for the kickbacks I discovered in the audit, I simply let the market do its job. Within a week, I sold their debt to a conglomerate that specializes in liquidating old-world relics. The Sterling name was stripped from the buildings before the new year. I set up a private, anonymous annuity for my mother, a quiet safety net she'll never have to thank me for. As for me, I realized my worth was never a variable in their equation. If you're building your own path in the dark, keep going. Your legacy isn't inherited, it's earned. Thanks for listening.